So one of the things that I learned early on, growing up in my chaotic and insane household, was that I could avoid taking accountability for almost anything I had done wrong by creating a whopping lie. I never felt very safe when I was a kid because I had a clinically depressed and abusive father and a very depressed mother who stayed in bed most of the time. And I also came from a really poor family, and I, on scholarship, went to, I think it was a wealthy Catholic school, but it could have just been like middle class. But like, I knew that these kids didn't like, poop in a U-Bahn can and throw it in the woods. They were comfortable. They had water, So I had to go there, and ouch, it's really hard to be poor, like one of 3 poor families in this school, and the bullying was severe. So during this time, I discovered that I could use this skill that I had gathered from my family of telling lies to have these fleeting moments of popularity or, being the most interesting person in the room. And I would tell these, the thing is that it's crazy because they were such whopping lies that they would always be uncovered, And then, of course, the mortification is so much worse than if you just would stay quiet. But for some reason, these dense children kept believing me. And that moment of belonging was worth it to me. And I continued to do this. So as a result, I walked around carrying this anxiety, this crippling anxiety of a lie about to be revealed. So basically, over the years, I continued to do this, and one example is in 5th grade. All the girls started talking about how they were developing breasts, and they were wearing training bras, and they would say things like, "Ooh, someone elbowed me in the boob, and it really hurt," and "Ooh, my new bra is so itchy," and I didn't have a training bra, and I had no reason to have a training bra, and that caught up, with a vengeance in junior high. But at this time, I didn't need a training bra, so I decided I would just take toilet paper. I wanted to belong, so I decided I would take toilet paper and I would just, roll it into a ball and put it into my sweater. And surely that would work. It's a tight sweater, right? Well, of course it didn't. So I went back, and I even remember saying to Kirsten Hoppus when I got back to the classroom, "Ooh, I just hit my boob on the door. It really hurt, And so like moments later, I look up and there's like this whole gaggle of like horrifying girls standing in front of me, and Carrie Barnes is in front, and she says, "One of your breasts is coming out of your sweater." And I look down, and it's like trailing down my leg, So I run to the nurse, and I say, "Well, the kids are being very mean to me, but what they don't know is that I have breast cancer." And she goes, "Go back to class, talk to your teacher," because she's just like, "Ugh, that was crazy." So I went back to class, and I flung open the door, and I said, "I have breast cancer, okay?" And there's just like this agog, like, "Ooh, what?" Like it's stunning, but I don't think anyone believed me. Maybe a couple, because again, dense. But I think it didn't make any sense, And my teacher, who was very kind, said to me, "Oh, you've got to tell the truth," and so I did. And again, severely mortifying, like much worse than it would have been had I just let it go. Another example is I started doing inhalants really young as to get high, because it was rad to get high, because then you were out of your whole like horrible life. And I would like have conversations with Phil Donahue and everything, and so he would give me permission to pass out, So I would do this, and one night, my parents came home earlier than expected, but I think maybe I just was so high that I wasn't really focused on the time. And I thought that I was talking to them in a regular voice, but really I was just like babbling incoherently with silver spray paint all over my face. And then I passed out at their feet. So I went to the hospital. They put me into a rehab for adolescents, a 30-day program. And the first thing that happened was the counselor said to me, "Okay, you're going to go into a group, and they're going to go around, and you're going to introduce yourself, and you're going to tell them your drug of choice." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not. Are you crazy? Like, I know that's a loser way to get high. I'm not stupid. I'm not going to be the loser. I'm not going to say I do inhalants, And he does the whole thing of like, a drug is a drug, addiction is addiction, and, honesty is key to recovery. So I say, "Of course you're right. I'll tell the truth." So they go around, they get to me, and I say, "My name is Leslie, and my drug of choice is heroin." And all these people have already said like wine coolers, marijuana, diet pills, whatever. So and as far as I was concerned, I was like the coolest person in the room right then, right? Fuck you guys, I do heroin, dummies. But again, you see the pattern, because I had to like completely mortify myself that night and tell them the truth, you know? But it was worth it, man, because I was so rad in that moment. So this continued on for years, you know, and I had all these really good friends in my 20s that were really interesting and nice, but I realized, you know, at some point when I kind of had this moment of clarity, when I realized that people would always say, that didn't really happen, right, Leslie? Oh, come on, did that really happen? Did Leslie tell you that, you know? And people were saying things to me that people said to my mother when I was growing up, and that they said to her father when I was growing up, because it was this legacy of lies, you know, and I was completely indulging in this compulsive behavior. And so I decided that I would start taking accountability, like instant accountability. So I would tell like 2 truths, and then the lie would pop out in this compulsive way, and then I would immediately take accountability. So I'd be like, and then I met Flannery O'Connor's granddaughter, you know? And then I would go, that's not true. What I just said there wasn't true. I apologize. You know? And people would look at me like I was a raving lunatic, and I guess I kind of was, you know? But, but I was really trying so hard to like break this pattern, you know? And I went to therapy, and I started doing these things like, you know, compulsive, like dealing with compulsions, and like talking about the symptoms of all of this, and like how I got here, and why was I so uncomfortable in my body, and why was I so uncomfortable with who I am, you know? And I did so much work, and I grew, and I, you know, all the things that they say, like blah, 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 blah. I became more comfortable. And as time went by, I realized that this thing that I had like developed to alleviate shame had become my greatest shame. And I didn't know how I could get past it, but I kept going and going and going and being honest, you know, and eventually it worked. The need to be someone else dissipated. I became me right here. And I feel like a really honest person now. And the thing is that there are people in my life like people I meet in my life who will say things like, people I don't know very well, because people who know me is like, you know, they know that I'm a little bit, woo. But but though people I just know, well, they'll be like, what, TMI, you know, ugh, too much information. And I hate when people say that, but they'll also say that's inappropriate, you know. And maybe it is, I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe people don't want to hear about me pooping in a U-Bend can. Okay, but this is the thing. Being a 41-year-old woman who is trustworthy is completely worth being called inappropriate.